Bonjour, I am Helen Timperley from the University of Auckland, where I teach and do research on education. Professional development used to be when teachers went on a course or a workshop and someone told them about some better teaching practices. But we have changed now to realise that doesn't work for teachers, and we now call it professional learning, where teachers are very focused on how to improve outcomes for their students. It may be social outcomes, maybe personal outcomes, maybe academic outcomes. And the professional learning usually takes place over a long period of time as the teachers learn how to change their practice to improve outcomes for their students. Teacher training was what we used to do. Someone would decide, inspectors or the ministry, that teachers needed to learn something new about teaching. So they would send them on a course outside of school or take them to a workshop and show them how to do the new teaching practices. We find that does not work because teachers need to find out how to do that in their classrooms with their students and what's most important to make a difference for their students. So professional learning is what happens in school, in classrooms in schools, as teachers try new ideas. They are very important because research is coming up with many new ideas about how to teach students better. But they are helped to do that in their classrooms and in the school rather than outside. In efficient professional development, that's very interesting because most people think of efficient professional development meaning it doesn't cost much money and doesn't take much time. Unfortunately, most professional development that results in better outcomes for students takes quite a lot of money and quite long periods of time, because teachers need to be supported to find out what's happening for their students, to observe their students, to assess their students, and then to use that to learn how to teach them differently. And that takes place over many cycles of investigating, trying something new, evaluating, trying something different. And that needs to be supported by someone who has expertise in that area, who can work alongside the teachers to change things for both them and their students. In our most successful program in New Zealand, we had one full-time person we called a facilitator, who was an expert in literacy, who worked in approximately 6 schools for 2 years. So it would be their salary for 2 years for every 6 schools. And the teachers mostly had the professional development in their own time. But it depends. Some systems that's fine, other systems the teachers would not agree to that. So that would be an additional cost. As a teacher, the first thing is to be able to assess your students very carefully so that you know exactly what they know, what they don't know, and to have some idea of what they need to learn. And that is probably the most challenging part. If you can do that as a teacher, then you can seek the knowledge you need to improve for the students. But until you know exactly what is happening for each of your students, and as I mentioned before, both socially for them and personally, and whether they are just academically engaged. By that I mean just go through the motions of learning rather than intellectually engage, where they're seeking information. To find out those things about your students, and then to get the professional help to to meet those students' needs, all the students in your class. And that is very challenging. It is too hard to just work alone with your students to improve. You can only draw on what you already know, and you need the help and support of your colleagues. Everyone, because everyone knows something different. Everyone has tried the same things. Some will be more successful than others. So you need to work with your colleagues in teams. One of the findings from research is that teachers learn a lot more when they work in teams and take collective responsibility for the students than if they just work by themselves in their classrooms. The way that I have usually worked as a researcher is to work alongside people who are helping teachers learn. So I'm one step back from the teachers, and I problem solve with those people providing the professional development or professional learning. That may be school leaders, it may be someone outside the school coming in, but I work with them. And how I work with teachers in that situation is that I find out from teachers, so I interview teachers, I observe teachers, and I ask them, what's happening for you? What are you understanding from this professional development? What is not working for you? What is working for you? So they become a very important source of information for me as a researcher that then I bring together and feed back to the school leaders or professional development providers so they can improve their practice. Other teachers are more directly involved in research themselves, but there's not a lot of evidence that that makes a big difference to practice. It may for that individual teacher, but if you want all teachers to learn, then it's to have each teacher involved in research is too difficult, I think, and very expensive. I think it's probably more effective for the teachers to understand the research. That's very important. New research that's coming through about learning, about discipline knowledge, and for them to use evidence to inquire into the effectiveness of their practice, every teacher, every day, and work with researchers on how to do that. And really, do teachers have time? And their main job is to teach. And it's quite difficult to both teach and be a researcher. Yes. What are you supposed to be doing? And small groups of students, every student could tell us whether they were doing it or not doing it. But then we asked them, what are you learning about, say, writing, learning to improve, learning how to improve your writing while you're doing this? And we found that most students did not know. They knew what they were doing, but they didn't know what they were learning about writing or about reading when they were doing that. And then we'd ask them, what does a really good piece of writing of this kind look like? So did they know what the goal was? And again, most students did not know. And we also asked, what does your teacher tell you to work on in your writing? And they were very vague about that. So and then we fed those results back to the teachers and said, your students know what they are supposed to be doing, all of them, but they do not know what they are supposed to be learning when they're doing that. And we discussed with the teachers, why would that be? And that probably led to more changes in practice than anything I have ever written. Other times we have, as researchers, we have been with leaders, again finding out from their teachers. If the leaders are leading the professional learning, we might observe what they are doing, and then we find out from the teachers, just like we found out from the students. What are you learning about when you, what sense are you making of this? And then we will feed that back to the leaders to talk to them about how to change things. So I usually take what is better called a research and development role. So I do the investigation, then I feed back the results, and then we look at what next. What does this mean for the next phase? And so it is always about learning for me. That you must develop what works in France for you, but using some of the principles that we know work for teachers and students. So one of those principles is always start with the students and always end with the students. So you don't evaluate something by a measure that's not related to students. So that you would need to translate that into your context. Another one is, to make sure that the teaching practices you focus on are there's a good research base for those practices. So that I know in New Zealand we have had teachers learning to do things that there is no research evidence to show that it would make any difference. But practices like assessment for learning, there is a very big research base for that. So to make sure that where you are putting your energy and your teacher's valuable time and effort is in the areas that are really going to make a difference. And another principle, I guess, is evaluation, that everything that teachers or leaders, if they change what they're doing, that they have the skills, not someone outside, but they have the skills to know if it's more effective than what they were doing before for their students. So often we have someone come in and say, you should do this, and the evaluation is left to that person or someone external. But it is the teachers and the leaders and the students who need to know if it's working. So not someone from outside. So to have the skills for teachers to do those things. So to work, I would say my advice to you is take the key principles of professional learning and work out how you can use those in your system to create a powerful professional learning environment. Yes, I have worked with Brian Annan since 1998, and he was in the ministry responsible for reforming 36 of our poorest schools with very low achievement. So I was with Viviane Robinson, I was the research developer, evaluator of those initiatives, and he was leading them from the ministry side. So at that time I was working with a research and evaluation role, and he was the person whose work we were evaluating. And I have worked with him in many different capacities since that time. He was had responsibility for many of the schooling improvement initiatives in New Zealand, and I led a team to evaluate all of those for 3 years, and then he joined the university. So he comes, of course, with a very rich experience of many different ways of doing things, and so he combines our research with his knowledge and to make things work actually in schools. And he is very busy at the moment working with networks of schools in New Zealand. Yes, education in the 21st century is very challenging politically and pedagogically, because the students who are in our schools now are very different from when we were students or when I was a student, and so we have to do something different for them if we want everyone to succeed. And so we have to rethink what kind of education we are offering for our young people, if it's going to be relevant to them and to our countries, both our countries, in the future. And there are many challenges, but I find those challenges very exciting. It's really important that everyone feels that they can try something new. It might fail, but it might succeed, and learn from their experiments and what they're trying to do. The freedom to take risks is really important, otherwise everyone is too afraid to try something different. There is a change happening in France in French education, and that's always very challenging for any system. So bonne chance, Monsieur Pillon.